It's almost Christmas, and you know what that means. Wait, deja vu. And speaking of deja vu, Hotel Transylvania 2 is directed by Genndy Tartakovsky, written by Robert Smigel and Adam Sandler, and features the voices of Adam Sandler, Selena Gomez, Andy Samberg, and Asher Blinkoff. And Hotel Transylvania 2 takes place about 7 years after the events of the first movie, and the hotel has now opened its doors to humans as well, and Mavis and Johnny now have a kid of their own, Dennis, voiced by Asher Blinkoff. But Dennis seems to be pretty much 100% human and no part vampire, so while Mavis and Johnny are off meeting Johnny's parents, Dracula, together with his group, try to bring out the inner vampire inside Dennis. Now, I have never had this experience of just pure deja vu watching a movie, because this is pretty much the exact same movie, and I have pretty much the same comments to give for it. I kind of copy-pasted my notes from the first movie's review to this one I have right now. It still has a great cast for the most part, but I still do think it's just too cartoony and wastes its interesting premise. Now, the animation in Hotel Transylvania 2 honestly looks exactly the same to me as it did in the first movie, and I'm sure there are little technical improvements here and there, but in terms of style, it still is pretty much the same thing. There's still a lot of good looking effects and environments, but there's still way too many exaggerated movements and facial expressions in the characters and stuff that, I should add, are not consistent with the characters either. I think that's another reason why I don't like this kind of style for this kind of material, because it doesn't really make the monsters feel like monsters anymore. There aren't as many out-of-place pop songs here, but there's a really random dance scene that goes on for just way too long, and I know this because I remember it. If this dance scene was really short, I would have completely forgotten it. And unfortunately, Mark Mothersbaugh's score still doesn't really get a chance to shine here. I think it would be really cool to hear him incorporate the old musical themes of these monsters in their old movies and whatnot, but we don't get that. The editing here is still by Catherine Apple, and guess what? I still have the exact same issues with the editing here. The speed seems to be compensating for the unfunniness of some of the jokes. Some of the emotional moments are brushed aside way too quickly. The one thing here in this movie, though, that's kind of different from the first one is that the writing seemed to have a lot of promise. Seemed to, that is the key word. I mean, at first it was kind of cool that this movie was actually fleshing out its allegories on discrimination and whatnot, and then by the end of the movie, they just kind of ditch its whole message. There is that interesting subplot where Johnny and Mavis visit his parents, but it's literally just for a few scenes and just a few gags that aren't really that funny, and then they go back to Transylvania anyway. And this movie is about 90 minutes long, and for the first 2/3 of that, I think it's just Dracula and his gang trying to bring out the inner vampire inside Dennis, and then for the last third, they shoehorn in this conflict suddenly with Mel Brooks playing Dracula's dad, Vlad. And again, this had promise. It seemed interesting at first, and then the way they tie up that story arc, it pretty much betrays itself. It betrays everything that the movie was trying to go for. And yes, the characters are still as flat as ever, and what really annoys me is that there are some characters here like Wayne the Wolfman who, there are a lot of implications about what he was like before, all the monsters kind of stopped eating humans, and that stuff is really interesting, but they just never go into it. Again, the most interesting parts of the movie, they never really get into. And yes, Andy Samberg still sounds lazy, and this leads me to believe that he's probably doing it on purpose. This is probably how he's interpreting the character. And in that case, I just don't like how he's interpreting the character. Asher Blinkoff voices Dennis, and he's really adorable, bless his soul, but he does sound like he's reading from a piece of paper a lot of the time. And I'm sorry to Genndy Tartakovsky, but him doing the same exact thing still won't convince me that he can pull off a full-length animated feature like this. But what would be cool is that if we suddenly got a full-length Samurai Jack movie one day. I think that would be really great, and I don't think it would have the same problems as this one, because Samurai Jack is pretty serious business. And I also have pretty much the exact same positive points to say for this movie. I mean, some of the visuals do have their moments to shine. Some of the jokes are still funny when they're not cut away from abruptly or ruined by some other gag that doesn't work. And the cast is as strong as ever for the most part. Keegan-Michael Key replaces CeeLo Green as Murray the Mummy, and I think he's even better as this character. He really, makes him really likable. And for the short time he has on screen, Mel Brooks as Vlad is quite good. But still, because this is the exact same movie, I feel the same exact way towards it. It's very mediocre. I didn't really enjoy watching it. And I hear they're gonna make a third one, and I'm just hoping they either make that third one really good or really bad, so they just stop making these movies. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Hotel Transylvania 2. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.